It was nice to see that we're live, which we are. So, hi, Teresa, it's nice to see you. David Durfee from Shaftesbury. And we'll just go around and introduce ourselves.
Rodney Graham from Williamstown, Chelsea.
Jed Lipsky, Lamoille, Stowe.
Henry Pearl, towns of Danville, Peacham, and Cabot.
David Templeman representing Brownington, Barton, and Westmore.
Frank Rice, Bennington Rutland District, towns of Danby, Dorset, Landgrove, Mount Tabor, and Perth.
Esme Cole, Windsor 6, Hartford.
Heather Supernut, Windsor 4, Barnard, Pomfret, Bridgewater.
And we have just other folks in the room, Laura Rich, who's our committee assistant, who I think you've been working with. And then can you just tell us who you are?
Yeah, we go to Sterling College and we're taking an environmental law and policy class. And we're all following a different bill. Mine is H165, the providing breakfast and lunches for public schools one. And yeah.
Good, well, welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm Liz. I'm following Bill H193. It's the Environmental Contingency Fund.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Nina. I go to the same school. I'm following the bill of H164.
I'm Meredith and I'm following H191.
Hey, thank you. And Teresa, over to you.
Great. Well, thank you for having me here today. It's a great pleasure to be in the committee room again and to have so many new committee members and legislators. So I'm hoping that it is okay. I've planned to take some time to educate you a little bit about Salvation Farms' work, what our priorities are, both historic and future, and then how that ties into some priorities within the state. It's great to have some Sterling students in the room. I received my college degree at Sterling College. It's a wonderful place. So thank you for having me here. I'm going to share my screen if that's...
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Let's see. Are you seeing that all right?
We are.
Okay. Transition. Great. So again, my name is Teresa Snow. I am the founder and executive director of Salvation Farms. We're a nonprofit organization based in Morrisville, Vermont. Our work has regional impact here in Vermont. Most of our direct impact programming happens currently in Northeast Vermont. We do have statewide impact as well, and then some national impact. While our mission written here on the screen is to build increased resilience in Vermont's food system through agricultural surplus management, what we aim to do is engage people with local farms in a way that can move Vermont more towards eating more of what its farms produce. And in addition to that, we hope to serve as a model for others in Vermont and beyond Vermont's borders. So I want to provide a little bit of context to our mission. First I'll admit our mission is a little jargony, so I'll apologize for that. But agricultural surplus management is a relatively new area of the food system, and essentially the work is designed to reduce food loss on farms. Salvation Farms is a leader in this area in Vermont as well as nationally. In 2016, we did the first statewide study in the nation to try to quantify how much edible produce was remaining on Vermont state farms every year. And based on farmer estimates compared to census data, what we discovered was an estimate of 14.3 million pounds of edible vegetables and berries remain on Vermont farms each year. We specify vegetables and berries because no orchard answered this survey. I could tell you a lot more about this food loss research, but I think what I would like you to know or be able to walk away with is where the farmers estimated this food loss was happening on their farms. They predicted that nearly 70% of this total food loss or this total volume had already been picked. So their labor was already in it, possibly already cleaned, already packed, and just sitting in their storage or on their dock with no market outlet. Salvation Farms talks about food loss because we only work with farmers. We don't manage food waste. And the difference for us is food loss is food that is still on the farm, where food waste has left the farm and is food that has the potential of ending up in the waste stream. Food left on farms is the best place you can lose food because farms aren't wasteful. They will put that farm in or that food into good use by tilling it in, turning it into soil, feeding it to animals, and it will become food again. So farmers are incredibly resourceful, not wasteful. So we consider it a lost food resource when food stays there. So why does food loss happen? There's a lot of different reasons. And essentially food loss is edible food that isn't picked or edible food picked but not sold or donated. There could be cosmetic reasons. It doesn't fit market specifications. There might be a slight condition issue. It might have a soft spot on it. Market fluctuations. Markets are finicky. They can get saturated quickly. There could be labor shortages, either a lack of affordable or available labor. Farm capacity. Some farms just might not have enough containers or storage capacity. And then there's the supply chain capacity, which ironically ties also into like market demand or fluctuations. If we had the potential for more processing, and that would be supply chain capacity, then farmers might be able to move more of their surplus product, that product that might not be perfect in appearance or condition, could have other outlets. Interesting story about these peppers I like to tell. The farmer didn't have a market for these beautiful green bell peppers because their only market was for red peppers. But they picked these peppers because there was an impending frost, and all peppers start out green. Had they been able to mature, they would have turned red. But every other farmer in the area was also picking their green peppers because of the frost, and therefore there was a market saturation and there was an abundance of green bell peppers. So surplus happens for a lot of different reasons, in addition to just planting a little more as a buffer to the unknowns that affect farms, whether that's environmental, pest, or markets. So understanding that this food is available in Vermont around the calendar, because some of our farms harvest and store product throughout the winter, there's an incredible opportunity. We are serving 19 million institutional meals a year. That's in our state's hospitals, prisons, and schools. Meanwhile, institutions as well as charitable food are sourcing an estimated $10 million worth, or if not more, of fresh produce from outside Vermont. Food insecurity numbers right now are hard to put our fingers on, from Feeding America's last estimate in 2020 being 9% to other accounts in local research indicating that upwards of 30 to 40% of individuals or households have accessed the charitable food system or food access programs in the last year or two. And knowing how much is available, understanding the need, we all need to eat, regardless of our financial security. We're capturing as a state between 5 to 10% of the available food that is sitting on our state's farms. We did a companion study to our food loss study to understand demand interest for local produce. The interest is quite high. Diversity interest is quite high, but most sites, institutional and charitable, are looking for perfect to near perfect looking food. Many of the barriers they face is storage capacity as well as labor. And so we think that through infrastructure investments, through more surplus management strategies, we can take Vermont surplus product, whether that's Salvation Farms or someone who adapts one of our models, to process some of this product so that it can hide blemishes, it can address the labor gaps that a lot of our institutional meal programs have, and it can make product more available by extending the shelf life or making it shelf stable through freezing, canning, or drying. So now you understand a little bit of the context in which Salvation Farms mission exists. Some of our work, it includes gleaning. We're most known as a gleaning organization, but our work goes far beyond that, but that's certainly where we started. We started gleaning in about 2004, 2005. And gleaning is an ancient, biblically referenced agrarian activity, which was typically done by the poor, where farmers were legally required at times to leave the corners and edges of their field for gleaning. In modern times, it looks like an organization like Salvation Farms or one of our partners in Vermont or nationally that build relationships with farmers, coordinate volunteers, go to farms, collect what they haven't harvested or what they've harvested but aren't selling, and then oversee the distribution of that food, predominantly to charitable food sites like food shelves, congregate meal sites, housing communities, etc. So our gleaning involves our direct gleaning, which we do in the Lamoille Valley and in the Northeast Kingdom, but also our work with the Vermont Gleaning Collective. We serve as a member of the Vermont Gleaning Collective. We also initiated the formation of the Gleaning Collective in 2012, but we also provide backbone support to that effort. I'll talk a little bit more about the collective a little later, but there's 6 different organizations that are part of that network of autonomous organizations. We've also aggregated and processed large volumes of surplus product. We started piloting that work in 2012. Right now, some of that work is on pause while we look for a new home, a new permanent home for that activity. We've done brokering, and we're looking to scale that brokering again. That brokering, where much of our other work has focused on receiving donations from farms and moving that food into the charitable food system because it's a donated food stream. Brokering is more about developing market opportunities for farms for their surplus product. And the work we've done is really explored what does the farm need for bulk volumes of surplus to cover or recoup some costs if we can find a buying market. And the primary market we've been working on developing is with the Vermont Department of Corrections and their meal program. We believe that we can move more fresh product to them at volume if we handle the logistics of the purchase and distribution to those sites. They have a high demand for meals on a daily basis, 900 to 1,200 meals a day. Some of our facilities are serving, and they have labor in their kitchen. And it's a great way for the state to invest in the working landscape, to use this food in that space, help individuals in our custody have a dignifying food experience and feel taken care of by the state. Our work also involves experiential education. So whether that's volunteers that join us or individuals that we've made food available to, a lot of this is about providing people the experience to understand local farms and what is seasonally, locally available. It's the only way that we're going to really learn how to feed ourselves, is if we build connections with farms and feel some agency over our ability to meet our most basic need, which is to eat. We've done workforce development. We started developing our workforce model. Also in 2012, we did some development of that within one of our state's prisons, and then evolved that model in the community with individuals with barriers who are like at transitional places in their lives, as well as barriers to employment. That is work that's currently not happening, but we have our sights on reinstituting that programmatic work. We also provide technical assistance and have conducted research. So the next two slides are about our workforce development, which you have a copy of this presentation. So I'm not going to spend really much time on this slide or the next. That's something you can go back and review, but it really justifies the power of the program that we were delivering. We felt providing individuals with transferable skills for post-harvest handling, inventory management, light manufacturing, as well as certifications, would help them transition into a myriad of employment opportunities in the food system. But we also wanted to know, as you saw on that last slide, whether they felt better about themselves as a result of participating in our program, and many did. This slide and the next few slides shows some of the numbers of our impact. We're still crunching the final numbers for 22, so we don't have a full spread of our crop diversity that we've collected in 22, but just to give you a sense, you can see that beautiful graph of the colors there. That represents the diversity of crops we distributed in 2021. There was an additional, I think, 30 different crops added to that, in addition to that list, that we had distributed less than 500 pounds of. Every year we determine what the economic value is of the crops that we capture, just to show some cost benefit analysis of how much our program's costing us and what value in terms of food are we putting into the community. So you can see some of our numbers in 22, working with nearly 50 farms, moving more than 80,000 pounds of produce of 51 different crop types, also moving other farm type items, eggs, cheese, vegetable starts, moving that to more than 50 different programs and engaging just under 200 volunteers that it gave us around 750 hours of their time. So much of the programs, the programmatic work I'm talking about, is still in the donated food stream. So it's being donated or collected through volunteer labor, which means it needs to be donated and then has to go to charitable food sites. There's many reasons why that's the case. So the graph here indicates the types of sites that we're moving this donated farm product to. And in 21, we were able to do some of that brokering I was speaking of, where we did buy and sell product to two of Vermont's correctional facilities. About 3,000 servings we moved to them. So that was something we purchased from farms and sold to correctional facilities. And then this year, or 22, we relaunched our work making frozen product, all in an effort to continue scaling that frozen food production, steering towards larger aggregation work, and also that re-anchoring of our brokering efforts. We like to find out the impact our work is having in a more qualitative way than just quantitative, just not how much did we move here and there and how many were involved. We really think that our work is a service to farms, and we believe through moving this product, we're providing people opportunities to engage directly with Vermont's food system. So the top quote and stat of 88% of respondent volunteers stated having more awareness about how local farms operate and the role local farms play in our food system. And then the one on my right, the 92% of food programs that we distributed product to reported being served by Salvation Farms increased their understanding and familiarity with locally grown in-season foods. And then 100% of the responding farms reported that Salvation Farms assists them in feeding more people in their community. So I mentioned earlier that I would circle back to the Vermont Gleaning Collective. I want to acknowledge that these are 2021 numbers. Right now, all of the members of the Vermont Gleaning Collective are crunching their year-end data from last year, as well as collecting a bunch of qualitative feedback through surveying of their farms, the sites they serve, as well as their volunteers. But I wanted to give you a sense of what this collective does. They're all different organizations, from Healthy Roots Collective or Collaborative in Grand Isle, Franklin County, to Salvation Farms in the Northeast, to the Intervale in Chittenden, to Hope down in Middlebury, Community Harvest of Central Vermont, serving Washington and Orange, and also up into Caledonia, and then Willing Hands, serving that Upper Valley region. And this group is really galvanizing its energy and understanding the power of having this network to be able to work together to serve farms in those border regions, but also to move volumes that one region might have when another region doesn't have it. And similar to each program where we collect how many farms we work with, how many volunteers we have, we also want to find out what that impact is on the people we're engaging. So you can see at the bottom just how volunteers are responding to working with the members of the Vermont Gleaning Collective. So I'm nearing the end of my presentation, so thank you for your patience. This is probably a lot of content for you to all process. I wanted to just mention how our work aligns with some national and global priorities. First is the New England Food Solutions, New England, their food vision, where I think it was released probably 10 to 12 years ago now, probably 10-ish, where they projected a goal of producing 50%, New England producing 50% of its own food by 2060. I love that and find it very inspiring, but I wonder if we were actually using the food that we were, more of the food that we were producing, how much more we actually have to produce to reach that goal. The USDA and EPA, a couple of years ago, established their first ever domestic goal to reduce food loss and waste by half by 2023. And then the United Nations, through their Yield-Wise program, they're demonstrating how the world can halve food loss by 2030. Jeez, it's a lot of numbers. So, and then as far as alignment here in Vermont, we don't take a narrow approach. We see that managing surplus product has a lot of power impacting a lot of the priorities in the new agriculture and food system strategic plan. I wrote some down. I won't tell them to you unless you want me to tell them to you. But you're really thinking about infrastructure, supply chain, exposure, access, consumer behavior change, all of those things. Also, the Governor's Commission on the Future of Agriculture and their action plan, prioritizing access for all people, or a healthy food system that serves all residents of Vermont. And then also the priority of infrastructure investment, which the governor also stated in his 2024 budget investment. I truly believe for us to use more of the food that we produce, we do need to invest in short supply chains. And I'm a firm believer, along with my team here at Salvation Farms, that if we create infrastructure that can use that food that isn't appealing to the market, we're investing in infrastructure that can support, imperfect to perfect food that can reach all types of markets. So what's ahead for Salvation Farms? We're looking to increase our infrastructure capacity anchor our models in Northeast Vermont. So that's growing our gleaning program, scaling our minimal processing, reestablishing a surplus crop aggregation and processing hub, really formalizing our brokering so that we can do that market development for farmers and help institutions source Vermont raised foods. We want to increase our investment and support in the Vermont Gleaning Collective and its work, establish new technical assistance relationships, which we've had some nationally, and we're currently helping a network of gleaners get established in Washington State. And we're interested in conducting more food loss research to get a clearer picture of what's going on here in Vermont and what might be the best options for us to capture more of that food. So there's my information. And as I said, you all have received a copy of this, so you can go back and reference any of the data or my contact information if so desired.
Thank you, Teresa.
Yeah, thank you for your time and attention.
Do you have a few minutes to stay and answer any questions if we have any?
Yeah, I have as much time as you want to offer me.
Okay. Representative Templeman.
I just have a quick semantic question. So the name of the organization is Salvation Farms. Is there an actual farm?
No, the name Salvation Farms is really in honor of farms, that we believe that farms were, and always will be our salvation. And that they really, small diversified farms are the cornerstone and centerpieces of healthy and wholesome, stable communities.
You mentioned the was it Gleaning Collective? Is that the umbrella organization? I didn't get that right.
Yeah. So the Vermont Gleaning Collective is one of the initiatives that we started. We serve as its backbone, but really it's being driven by its 6 member organizations.
And are they all, thank you for clarifying that. I'm wondering, are they all as robust as Salvation Farms in terms of, I mean, if we looked at their numbers, would they be as impressive?
Yes, but they vary because all of the members are different in the work that they do. So, for example, the Intervale Center, I'm not quite sure what their gleaning numbers are. I think they might have a shorter gleaning season, but the work of the Intervale Center is broad and very impressive, from farm incubation to food hub activities, and then a place like Hope in Middlebury, again, I'm not quite sure what their annual numbers are for their gleaning program, but they provide poverty relief programs that also, like the Intervale, are incredibly diverse and really powerful. So I would say our numbers are probably in the middle comparatively to the other Gleaning Collective members. So
good, thanks. Representative Rice.
Thanks. Yeah, Teresa. So I represent 5 towns that span 2 of the 3 counties that are not do not have organizations in the Gleaning Collective. So I'm just wondering sort of what the development of the collective and of the individual organizations looked like, and is there sort of work on the ground to expand that to cover the whole state?
Yeah.
Within the context also of, we've seen presentations from the food hubs that are working throughout the state too, and the counties that are not served by the food hubs overlap with the counties that are also not served by gleaning organizations.
Yeah, that's a great question. So when we started gleaning, I think the Intervale Center had just started a program the year before. So early in 2000s were the youngest gleaning programs. We instituted the Vermont Food Bank's gleaning program, and then we proceeded to support some other organizations in building their own gleaning programs. I think Willing Hands also started around 2004, 2005 as a perishable food rescue program that also then started to integrate gleaning. the areas where we have gaps in the collective, they're not void of gleaning. The Vermont Food Bank does glean in Brattleboro, and I think they've provided some services over into Bennington County, as well in Rutland County. There was a collective member in Rutland prior to their dissolving, the Rutland Area Farm and Food Link. And it's just a matter, I think, for the, and I don't want to speak on behalf of the food bank. I think that as the collective was getting established, it's a matter of figuring out, well, what does it mean to be a member? What are expectations? Is it easy to integrate into those expectations? There's been a lot of aggregated data as being a part of this, and shared use of a web-based platform that Salvation Farms created that allows volunteers to register to glean no matter where you are in the state of Vermont, so that your allegiance is to gleaning, not to a particular organization. And I think, with all due respect to the food bank, I think just the scale of their organization, it's hard to integrate into perhaps a smaller network with its own tools when you have your own, right? They're well established with their systems. So I do know that Bennington County is probably the most fertile area for a gleaning program, in the sense that I don't think they have a real anchored effort there.
Representative Cole.
I'm wondering if you could speak to a couple examples of maybe infrastructure projects in the next coming years that you're really excited about, just to give us another picture.
Yeah, thank you. We have pending purchases of a walk-in cooler, walk-in freezer, walk-in cooler in the Northeast Kingdom, just to support our growth of gleaning services in that region, a walk-in freezer to support our scaling of frozen food production. We are mindful that when we're processing certain crops, they're available in abundance fresh. And so it's nice to be able to store those crops so we don't cannibalize our gleaning distribution, so to speak. But really the biggest infrastructure piece for us is going to be a 3,000 to 5,000 square foot facility, much like a facility we occupied for 3+ years in Winooski, where we ran a surplus crop aggregation hub and workforce training program. It will have multiple cold storage units, may have some of its own freezer infrastructure, will house a blast freezer, a processing kitchen, as well as large space for cleaning and packing raw product. Likely have some office space, as well as break or classroom space. Depends on the route we want to go, whether it's workforce development or second chance hiring. Will dictate some of those other spaces. So,
Representative Rice.
Can you talk through the timeline of sort of formalizing or growing the brokering piece of your work, and if there are sort of specific challenges to that you face?
Yeah, that's a great questions. Right now we're reestablishing relationships with the Department of Corrections. COVID clearly shut down a lot of activity, specifically in those facilities for a lot of safety reasons. We had started our brokering in 2018, 19, and a little bit in the midst of the pandemic, but it completely ceased this last year. So what we're doing is trying to, with some new staff, get them oriented to the facility so that they understand security issues at the facilities, in addition to what the infrastructure capacity is at each facility, from their ability to store product, to process product, how many meals they're serving, what the crew looks like in the kitchen to be able to receive what diversity and at what volume, as well as what their desired crops are. So we've started doing some of those site visits this early winter. And that's coinciding with outreach to larger farms. We're needing to find farms that are producing at high enough volume. They would be wholesale farmers, that what they cull is worth moving through brokering. So that's all advancing this year. In addition to that, we're looking at defining a specification guide, so that we can get really clear with farmers when they're communicating the reason a product is available, what the condition and quality issue is. That's clear to us, so we don't ever see the food or touch it. We arrange for the transportation, but then we can communicate that same quality, condition, reality to the end user, which is the prison. And then also define that price point. So.
Teresa, just scrolling back through the presentation, I have it on my iPad here, and I didn't see anywhere any information about how you're funded, or a request for funding, more notably. Can you just tell us a little bit about where you get your, I mean, I know you have volunteer staff, but maybe there's some expenses that you also have to cover.
Yeah, it's great. Thank you for asking that question. As founder, you get so passionate about all of the work, you know, that's such an important piece not to overlook. Right now, our budget is just under $1 million, projected this year at $932,000. And majority of our funding comes through philanthropic means, fundraising from individuals and corporate donors, philanthropic grants, as well as some revenue that we generate through our activities. We receive no state funding through any appropriation. We have received, never received federal grant, and have received very few state grants. We do have some fundraising events and such that also bring in a small amount of income to the organization. As far as a request to the state, I do know that there is a recommendation within the Farm to Plate plan in one of the briefs, the Food Access and Farm Viability Brief, that recommends $1,000 annual appropriation to support statewide gleaning coordination. Well, we would love to ask you all for that. This is not a formal ask, because I'd want to make sure that the Vermont Gleaning Collective is firmly behind us, and that that is money we know how we would use to support statewide gleaning. Other than that, I think it's going to be a big lift for our organization for some of our upcoming infrastructure projects, and knowing that it is a priority for the governor, and also within both the commission's plan and the Farm to Plate plan, to invest in the supply chain, essentially for the resilience of, you know, our state's food system. You know, we would be very open to conversations about one-time investment for infrastructure.
Great. Any other questions from the committee? Well, Teresa, thank you again for coming in. And sorry you weren't able to be here in person this year, or this week, this time anyway. Yes. But if you're ever in Montpelier, feel free to stop in and say hello.
Thank you. I had kind of close and slightly extended exposure to someone with COVID that had pretty intense symptoms. And the last thing I'd want is to remove any of you from the State House. So I also would have preferred to have been there in person. So, but thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.
All right. Have a nice weekend.
You too.
All right. Wow. Here we are. nothing on our agenda for the rest of the day. I don't know, we're not gonna stay much longer, and I'll leave it up to the group to decide if you want to take a short break and come back, or just have what I think will be a quick conversation about how we want to move forward and proceed with the legislation. What's the preference? Short break or?
Truck ahead.
Truck to it. Okay. All right. So, without rehashing the conversation from this morning necessarily, I think we had a couple of sort of key thoughts. One was Rodney's final comment about let's be clear on what problem we're trying to solve, if there is a problem. There may be, but let's try to reach some clarity on that. And then Henry's earlier remark, which it came up a couple of times, sort of similar, what is the goal? And remembering that we have statute, we have a program in place, it functions to an extent pretty well, and we've heard, but maybe not perfectly. And then Mike's mentioned the fact that the local purchasing incentive is currently specific to public schools only, and we've talked about expanding that to include the schools that accept public tuition students as well, independent schools. What else? And without trying to answer the first two questions, although we can work on that a little bit if you want also, but what else? What are sort of the key things you're already thinking about between now and Tuesday? So that when we're here on Tuesday, we can try and wrap things up.
Specific to the definition of local.
Right, and then I'll shift to the other, but specific to the local purchasing incentive.
Mm-hmm.
So the definition of local is part of that. Okay, yeah.
I just think from what I listened to from everybody here, it sounds like we need to redefine or define what exactly we're talking about regarding local.
Mike?
I would suggest that we don't need to redefine, and that perhaps there's a sort of more subtle way to address if there's a piece of it that we want to talk about, like the direct relationship, part, that we don't sort of dig into the bigger. I imagine we probably made a lot of people nervous if they were watching on YouTube with our conversation about the need to redefine what like
that happens all the time.
Yeah, of course. But I'm just thinking that probably I think probably it has been functioning pretty well, and maybe there are a couple pieces that we can sort of respond to what we've heard from people about ways that it could be tweaked without sort of diving into the.
Yeah, and also, I guess it was your comment, Henry, it's a separate comment about well-intended programs that turn out to be so complex to administer. You can all think of examples, I'm sure.
Could we take Mike's idea and basically take the definition we already have and then just tweak it a little bit?
Yes. Short answer to that question is yes, we can do that. And maybe then we would step back though first and say, what problem are we trying to solve? And then what's the goal here? But yes, we could certainly do that. On the universal school meals bill, we're going to have I'm not sure. We're going to have some folks come in on Tuesday who can speak to perhaps the need or the preference for dealing with the childcare institution, the childcare facilities that have been getting sort of inadvertently some benefit. So I think we'll maybe have some clarity there and be able to make some progress on that point.
And just to give a little bit of further context to the independent schools qualifying for the local food incentive piece, it is just that because the local food incentive piece was in the broader community schools, it's Act 67 that said that everything in there was specifically for public schools. And so just specifying that independent schools receiving publicly tuition students would qualify for local food would just line it up with the rest of universal school meals instead of having to stand out.
That's helpful enough. Did you also want to mention, you had reached out to Rosie with a question about schools that are with contracts with management?
Yeah, I had reached out about whether, we had heard testimony, I think it was from Helen at NOFA, that the agency had determined that getting out of that wanting to start applying for these local food incentive grants was not reason enough to get out of a previously negotiated contract with a private food vendor. And I had reached out to Rosie to ask, could we say that in fact it was reason enough? And she responded that it turns out that it's actually that those contracts are pretty heavily regulated by USDA. Mm-hmm. And so it's USDA that is saying that it's not reason enough. And so in fact, no, we can't. So about that. But she did sort of provide a lot of slightly reassuring information about just how many FSAs are in those contracts and how many, basically it's going to become less and less of a problem pretty quickly because those contracts are, I think there are 10 coming up in the next 2 years or something like that. And they'll be completely the cycle will completely turn around by 2027.
Right, yeah, the longest contracts are 5-year contracts.
And there are ways also that I can share with you if you're interested, that they sort of provide ways for districts that are in long-term contracts that are interested in local food purchasing to sort of do it in other ways, like through the other local food grants that they can buy specific, make a specific purchase and use it for a specific meal. She gave the example of including locally purchased ingredients on a taco bar where the piece that's locally purchased might not be a part of the federally reimbursable meal, but it's still there and sort of is a way for that school to be making local food purchases outside of their contract with private vendor.
Yep, good. All right, any other final thoughts today?
Just from this week, a point that both John and I kind of caught onto was the way that the food grant distribution was divvied out didn't seem, I don't know if fair is the right word, but coherent with the usage. So it seems that the more local food a school is using, the less of a grant they receive, mathematically speaking. It'd be great to make an adjustment to that at some point, or address it as an issue to discuss, I should say.
So this is with the local purchasing incentive? Right.
So like if you bring in 15% of the budgeted, of the food budget, you get, if I remember correctly, there's something 15
cents per meal.
15 cents per meal, and then 20 cents per meal, then 25 cents per meal. Yeah. And it seems that the higher you go, if you actually do the math, the less you get proportionately. It seems intelligent from the, but when you actually crunch the numbers, it doesn't really work to the advantage of taking on more local food.
Okay. So, right, yeah, and I know I was anyway interested in hearing that the cost of local ground beef compared with the cost of value ground beef was roughly $1
per pound.
Per pound, yeah, which helps sort of think about what is that per meal then. Yeah.
And it does, but I also think there's diversity in terms of, you know, a meat product versus vegetables. And I know there's still quite a differential, but I think it is different from food item to food item, right?
Okay, good point. Yeah, so that's one product out of quite a number that are available both, you know, here or there. And yeah, and I don't have any sense of what the differential might be in other situations. Apples, for example. Okay. And then nothing to do with either of those bills, but wondering whether the sponsors of H205 will think you might want to come back to that sometime next week with some of the changes that we talked about. How are you feeling like that's time-wise that will make sense?
Yeah, that should be fine. I mean, depending on what Mike
In his
space capacity is for that.
Okay. All right, well, we'll plan on having some time, maybe Wednesday, is that?
That sounds great.
Okay, and then if that doesn't work out with drafting wise, then we can set that. Okay, good. Well, committee, thank you very much for all of your hard work and time and attention. I'm not promising next week will be any less intense, but we will be, and yeah, just to be clear, we will have the budget that we're going to look at starting on Wednesday. And we have a week essentially to consider the various requests that have come in. We've already talked about some today even. And we'll have the agencies in next week to explain why they've budgeted $10 million, for example, in that particular program. And then the other agencies that were also asking for funding that has something to do with our committee, they'll come in and explain that too. And then we'll have a week to think about response to send to appropriations. Good, thank you.
Thank you.